Euclid's first common notion is this: things which are equal to the same thing are equal to each other. That's a rule of mathematical reasoning. It's true because it works. Has done and always will do. In his book, Euclid says this is self-evident. You see, there it is, even in that 2,000-year-old book of mechanical law. It is a self-evident truth that things which are equal to the same thing are equal to each other.
Last year, Steven Spielberg and Daniel Day-Lewis brought Lincoln to life. And our next guest is here to explain just why so many lessons from our 16th president translate to today. Joining the table, Rich Lowry, editor of the National Review and author of the new book, Lincoln Unbound, How an Ambitious Young Rail Splitter Saved the American Dream and How We Can Do It Again. We were already talking about the book before it started, and Brian, you said it best. It's amazing the comeback Abraham Lincoln has made in our national consciousness in the movie and other things that we're seeing and reading. And you now bring to the table a concept that maybe perhaps we draw from Lincoln as we look to rebuild the GOP in the way it needs to be. Fair enough?
Yeah, well, I portray Lincoln as the foremost apostle of opportunity in American history, which he was. And I trace that through his personal life, where he rose from literally nothing, obscure, backwoods, impoverished upbringing, and how aspiration and opportunity undergirded all his policies, all his politics, explains his opposition to slavery in large part, and then ask what we can learn about that today. Because I really do think we have a crisis of opportunity in this country.
And is there a crisis of opportunity in the GOP as well that you look at in a way that it can be, I don't know, go back to its foundation to an extent?
I think the Republican Party, to succeed, always has to be, in some significant respect, the party of Lincoln. It has to be the party of opportunity. It has to be the party of aspiration. And it has to have an economic agenda that connects with those things. And one of my criticisms of the party the last couple of years is it's just become so debt-obsessed. Now, that debt is a serious problem. It's something we have to deal with. It's more of a long-term problem, though. And it also, for most people, that's not what they're sitting around their breakfast tables discussing when they're trying to pay the bills. So every time a House Republican gets up there and talks about the debt, I want to also hear him talk about health care. I also want to hear him talk about the cost of college and talk about these things that are really impacting the middle class and things that are really making it hard for the working class to get ahead. I'm not so concerned about inequality in our society. I think it's inevitable. I am concerned about the lack of mobility, especially up from the bottom.
I would say that when you say you want to hear a Republican talking not just about the debt but about health care or about something else, we do, but we hear them talking about how it doesn't work.
Correct. And this is National Review. We've been on this kick for a while now. It's not just enough to say you oppose Obamacare, which they should. I think that it's terrible public policy. You have to tell people what you would replace it with, and that's what has been missing. Now, Congressman Tom Price has a bill now that speaks to this, but most House Republicans have just been scared to be out there on some clear alternative because they think it's a target on their backs and it's easier just to make the critique, which is true. It's always easier just to make the critique, but you need the positive element as well.
Patty?
On the spending side of things, you talk in the book about how Lincoln was so interested in transport, in infrastructure generally, and that's something, again, that the GOP should be focusing on today, but you don't hear anyone in Washington saying, actually, you know what, let's invest, let's make our internet speeds faster in the country, let's make sure that our bridges and our railroads are working as efficiently as they should for a global power.
Yeah, a couple things. One, you're absolutely right, transportation was one of Lincoln's passions. And it goes to, again, his upbringing and his personal experience. Because when Lincoln was a boy, and if you lived more than a couple miles from any significant waterway, you couldn't get goods anywhere. They're just impossible to transport. And even if you were close to a river, say the Mississippi, you could float it down on a raft, but you couldn't get it back up. His father went down to New Orleans a couple times and apparently walked all the way back home. So you can't have a market economy when you're limited in that sort of way. So he loved steamboats, he loved canals, he loved railroads, because you couldn't have a functioning market without them, and people's opportunities to rise were blighted without them. And in the context of that time, we didn't have sophisticated financial markets. We didn't have big industrialists. So if you're going to do these big projects, you had to have government support on some level.
Part of me still wants to get back to Lincoln as the concept in the book, but since we're on this theme, I think it's obvious that Lincoln, whether the party was solution-focused, right? And that's what you're talking about. So when you talk about offering up alternatives, I guess I get back to the point is that there's nothing that's solution-focused. In Congress, they want to keep their jobs, and maybe Obama's now looking at legacy. I don't know. But what's going to change the culture? People are going to read a book, and what's going to change the overall culture?
In Washington?
Yeah, I mean, the point is that
within the GOP.
You point out the problem, and it is the right problem to point out that they aren't necessarily counting with options that are viable, that can work. So what's going to change it so we get back to solution-focused debates?
Well, I think two separate things there, I think. One, the problem in Washington in terms of gridlock is just you have two parties with very different conceptions of public.
Some degree of gridlock, correct? I mean, it's always been a problem.
Yeah, but I mean, you have a big disagreement. President Obama and Republicans don't agree on what the solution to entitlements is. So you have a big stalemate, and you had an election last year, and people are just beginning to kind of clue into this, that basically ratified the stalemate, right? You saw how House Republicans and President Obama worked together, which was not at all well, and the public sent them both back. So I think on some of these big questions, the public really hasn't decided. In terms of the Republican Party, I do think the big figures in the Republican Party realize this is a problem. If you listen to Marco Rubio, if you listen to Paul Ryan, if you listen to Bobby Jindal, they know the party needs to go in this Lincolnian direction. What isn't there yet is kind of the policy meat on the bones, and that's going to take some time to work out, I think.
How to recover the Lincoln ethic. It looks great. The book is Lincoln Unbound. You can read an excerpt on our blog, mojo.msnbc.com. Rich Lowry, thank you so much. It's great to have you on the show. Come back. Good luck with the book.
Okay,
this is Hub Day, right?
Absolutely.
All right. Get on Amazon, buy it. Up next, today the market is posing to be a triple threat, and that